Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. MC Lyte hosts I Am Woman, a celebration of women in hip-hop, this Friday night at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. I spoke to the hip-hop legend about her trailblazing career, growing up in Brooklyn to become the first solo female rapper to release a full album on a major record label.
How are you?
MC Lyte, hey, this is an honor. Thanks so much for joining us on WTOP here in D.C.
Yeah, you got it. No problem. On the top. I'm here.
On the top. Well, you're on the top of the hip hop world. I mean, you're a legend of the genre. So, I mean, we're speaking to, rap royalty. This is fantastic. So we're talking because you are bringing a special show to the Kennedy Center. It's called I Am Woman, a celebration of women in hip-hop. It'll be Friday, April 15th at 8 p.m. Before we get to this specific show itself, remind our listeners of your role. You have a really cool, fancy new role at the Kennedy Center, right?
Oh, well, I'm just one of the people that kind of chimes in from here, here and there when there's decisions that have anything to do with hip hop, serving as somewhat of an ambassador among many is quite a few of us, but I'm happy to be on the board. And yeah, you were talking about I Am Woman, a celebration of women in hip hop. It is necessary and overdue. And I am so glad that the Kennedy Center for their 50th anniversary decided to choose me to help curate a wonderful night where we get to shower love and attention on those MCs who rarely get the spotlight in a space like the Kennedy Center.
Fantastic. And I want to go into, some of the artists that you're going to shine a spotlight on. How is it actually set up? Are you actually going to be on stage sort of, hosting or doing the segues in between introducing each of the artists, or what's your role in the show?
Yeah, I'm definitely hosting. So I'll be hosting the entire evening, and I'm looking forward to it because I will be immersed in a night of live performance. And I host things from time to time, host events. So this is just, to me, I'm going to have as much fun as the audience, honestly.
MC will be being the MC. It's going to be great.
Yes. The MC will MC.
MC will MC. Now, I would love to go into some of the artists. I mean, I don't know how deep you can talk on each one, but I'd love to hear as much as possible out each of them if you could. I mean,
sure thing.
Tell me about Da Brat.
Well, Da Brat has been a friend of mine since we met through So Def. We met through Jermaine Dupri while I was out on tour with Crisscross. And so we've stayed in contact, and we've actually recorded a couple of things together throughout time. But when it came time to put this show together, sitting with the Kennedy Center and making the decision as to who was going to be in the first allotment of performances this year, definitely Brat's name came up. And, I gave her a call, which, by the way, most of the women on this bill I am friends with or have contact with or, talk to from time to time. And some of them I talk to more often than others. But the truth is I can call any of them up and say, hey, we're headed to the Kennedy Center. Let's go. And that's what happened with Da Brat. And of course, she's got some really popular songs that I think people are going to want to hear. Never performed at the Kennedy Center before, so this is going to be a fresh look. Same thing with Remy. Remy serves on our Hip Hop Sisters Foundation board, and so we talk often. And it was just like, hey, I need you here because you've never done this venue before, and I think we want to bring in some of the best in hip hop and show the Kennedy Center audience a really great time. And you know what? Not too long ago, I did a lineup like this for Essence Festival in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
And so Trina was on that bill. So it seemed natural when her name showed up on the list with Kennedy Center that we could make that a dream come true. Let's get Trina, and some of the women, we totally understand that it's only a bill like this that would give way to them performing at the Kennedy Center. So I'm just happy to be a part of them also creating history for themselves and their brand and their fans.
Fantastic. And it's a great platform, and I'm sure they're very grateful that you're doing it. Well, we mentioned Debrat, we mentioned Trina, we mentioned Remy Ma. Who else we have?
Oh goodness. Well, we've got Tierra Whack from out of Philadelphia, who is probably our newbie on the show, on the lineup. She's been out for a while and making a lot of noise. She's with Interscope Records, and we are blessed to have her. And she represents our new school. So we're lucky to have her on with us. And then, of course, we have Mumu Fresh, who's been at the Kennedy Center more times than any of us can count, on her own, as well as Black Girls Rock. And so I know the Kennedy Center audience loves her. And she's also a singer. So that, is a double threat, with rapping and singing, Mumu Fresh. And then we have Mama Soul out of Flint, Michigan, who is a definite beacon of light in her community and what it is that she's been able to do for for the state of Michigan, with her presence and her content and her social awareness and her community activism. I definitely wanted Mama Soul to join us on this bill. And then, of course, we have Yo-Yo and Moni Love. Now, Yo-Yo and I used to be on the same record label. She's out here on the West Coast. She's the West Coast diva. And she and I have a deep sisterhood. And so, of course, I wanted to have Yo-Yo. And Moni Love and I used to attend the same high school, George W. Wingate in Brooklyn. And yet she is from London. She still served her time on the streets of New York, and is a Brooklynite, having served time in Brooklyn and attended George W. Wingate. So I wanted to have Moni too to represent. And then we've got poetry, we've got dance, we've got quite a few elements of hip hop to celebrate that night.
It sounds fantastic and a great variety of artists. Now you mentioned, growing up in Brooklyn, in the 70s. I want to know about your backstory a little more. I mean, I know it's well documented, but for our listeners, remind them, what it was like growing up in New York, around New York, Brooklyn in the 70s, and how you got into this whole rap game to begin with.
Yeah, totally. Well, first off, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to talk with you today. And, if I were to take you back to the days of the 70s in Brooklyn, I don't know that there'd be much hip hop. I got my dose of hip hop whenever I went to Spanish Harlem, where my grandmother lived. And that's where I heard the Treacherous Three and Curtis Blow and Africa Bambaataa and the Funky 4+1 More, which involved Sha Rock, who was the first female MC I ever heard rock the microphone. And it wasn't until later, like once we get into the late 70s, where we have the Sugar Hill Gang, which was on mainstream radio. So that's when it kind of filtrated into Brooklyn. Not unless, of course, you had a tape of some sort that you were able to garner from uptown, from the Bronx or Harlem, and you were able to take that tape into Queens or into Brooklyn. So at that point, then I began to hear the Lottie Dotties, Slick Rick and Dougie Fresh, and Salt and Pepper had a song called Showstoppers that I heard, and Eric B and Rakim. And, I got to hear a lot of those in the early 80s with Run DMC and so on and so forth. So growing up in Brooklyn in the 70s was more about reggae.
Gotcha.
Honestly. Mm-hmm.
So those are the artists that you start seeing, just starting to bubble up, and this we're and what's really cool, listeners. I mean, this is the ground floor of this genre that is now a worldwide phenomenon, like arguably the most successful. But we're talking the very roots of it, and so you're talking about these artists that you're seeing around town and getting inspired by. So then, how does it work for you? Do you go to these shows and then you come home to do you have like a little notepad, pen and a pad, like in your own bedroom, or riding the bus across town, or you know what I mean? Or are you? I want to
Right.
know about
No,
how you start crafting those first lyrics and say, I think I can make a go of this as a rapper myself.
yeah, well, we were in the 70s. Once we knew of hip hop, I remember being in, what grade was I in? I think I might have been like in the seventh grade, where we would start banging on the desks and, banging on the lunchroom table, and we'd all have our rhymes. We'd actually write them ahead of time so everybody knew what the other one was going to say.
Okay.
And then, everybody, what you're saying? Okay, great, let's go. Boom, boom, bap, boom, boom, bap. And then everybody would say their rhyme, and everybody would clap and, support one another. It wasn't a lot of battling that was happening at that time. We were all part of the same crew. And it wasn't until I heard Salt and Pepper that I discovered I really wanted to go after it in a real kind of way. And so, yes, I had a composition book and I'd write rhymes and poetry and a bunch of stuff in those books. And it wasn't until one of the guys that I rhymed with in school, Eric Cole was his name. He called me up and said that there was a label that he had just signed to, and they were looking for a female MC. And did I want to go check them out? And I was like, yeah. And we got on the Staten Island ferry and went over to Staten Island, and I auditioned, which I didn't really call it an audition at the time, but now that I look back, that's definitely what it was. Got there, was about 9 or 10 guys in a basement. And as soon as I got down there, they were like, okay, rhyme. And I opened up my rhyme book, and Milk D, producer and rapper and writer Milk D, he came up with a track right there on the spot for one of the rhymes that I read out of my book, which was I crammed to understand you.
Wow. And what was the label? I want to know how you get signed for that first Light as a Rock album, because that thing
Yeah,
I believe was it the first, you were the first solo female rapper to release a full album with that?
yeah, with a major record label, yes.
Right, right.
And so Milk and Giz and Nat Robinson had a record label called Priority. But then there was also another Priority that Brian Turner out on the West Coast had. And I guess his was established before ours. And so we had to change our name to First Priority. And then they did a major deal with Atlantic Records.
Gotcha. Well, tell me about creating Light as a Rock then. Both the album, well, and the song too, because the name of this show, I Am Woman at Kennedy Center, that was a track on there as well. But just remember, and Paper Thin, of course, Paper Thin was huge. Just take me into the creation of that album itself.
Well, honestly, that entire album was basically written in my composition book that I had for many years. So none of it was new except, and you got to forgive me because sometimes I forget what was on Light as a Rock versus Eyes on This.
Sure.
So Light as a Rock was 10% Diss, I Crammed to Understand You, MC Lyte Like Swinging, Light versus Vanna White, I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar. Paper, did I say Paper Thin?
No, but now you
Paper
did.
Thin. Yeah, Paper Thin. Yeah, all of that was pretty much in my rhyme book already.
Wow. That's so cool that, I mean, it just, your rhymes you're writing in the composition book is suddenly an album. And then after that, you do Eyes on This, and arguably your most famous track, which was Cha Cha Cha. Tell our listeners when the idea for Cha 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 came to you.
Well, honestly, King of Chill, one of the producers, he actually produced Paper Thin. he wrote and produced Cha Cha Cha. It's probably one of the very few songs that someone else wrote for my career.
Mhm.
He wrote Cha 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 and he wrote the rhyme for Dr. Soul, because I didn't understand the track for Dr. Soul because it wasn't hip hop to me. And so everybody wanted me to do it, Foster McElroy. And that was actually the first record In Vogue showed up on, doing the background vocals for the song called Dr. Soul. And so I said to my manager, if somebody else writes it, I'll do it, but I can't catch a rhythm on this thing at all. And so King of Chill wound up writing the rhymes to that too. So he came up with Cha Cha Cha, and I thought it was corny. I was like, to this Mardi Gras, what the hell? And then and he was saying stuff in a really kind of awkward way, well, I'll be damned, might as well tell you who I am. It just was weird for me. And so I'm glad I did it though. Many artists are faced with having to make choices about music that they will do, and whether they want to say someone else's lyrics, or whether they can do something that's not really reflective of who they are, or they can even do something that they don't really love, but because they understand that someone else may have a vision and an ear for a hit record, they'll go along with it. And I'm glad that I chose to go along with it.
We all are. I think I think Cha Cha Cha. I mean, whenever they do, what was it? VH1 ranked it one of its 100 greatest hip hop songs. Whenever they do a list, I feel like
Yeah.
that one will always pop up on there. But I mean, you could pick multiple of yours. It's funny. But what do you think? What do you feel when you see stuff like that? When you see your work ranked as some of the best of all time? When you see those lists compiled, I go, what does that make you feel proud? Or is there ever ones where you're like, you know what, they picked the wrong song?
Oh, goodness, that's funny. No, you know what? I think what's so weird about it is when I see a song on one of those top ranked hip hop lists, I go, yeah. I get riled up when I see nothing. When I go, what? How did I not make the list at all? I
Right.
don't really care what song makes it. It's just
As long as
when
you're
it's not
represented. Yeah.
yeah, when it's not there is when I notice. It's like, oh, wait a second. What's happening here?
Well, yeah, we got it's exactly. I feel like those lists, they need to represent all of the major, fundamentals, the creators of this genre. If they're not on there, then it makes you turn your head a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I know we'd be here all day if we talked about all of your songs, but tell me about Roughneck, because I think that was the first one that got you nominated the Grammys, right?
Yeah, totally. Roughneck, I went down to Virginia. I was actually finished the album. And Merle and Bob, who was my A&R executive, he would often let me just go create, and then at the last hurrah, he would send me to what we deem as a quote unquote super producer. And so that's exactly what happened when I went down with Teddy Riley at the Future Recording Studio in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And when I walked in, they already had the track up. So they already knew that they wanted me to rhyme to that track. And so I caught a vibe with one of the gentlemen there, Akil Davidson. He was one part of Rex and Effect.
Yeah.
And he and I, we talked, and he's like, okay, what do you want to talk about? I was like, well, you know what? When I think of Apache doing Gangsta Bitch, I want to be able to do something for the guys in my neighborhood. And I live amongst all Caribbean folks, Jamaicans, Haitians, Bajans, Barbadians, Trinidadians. I mean, you name it. I'm there in the midst of them, and they call themselves Roughnecks. And right there, the idea was born, and we just thought of how to illustrate vividly through words the experience of one of these guys that live in Brooklyn.
Wow. Thanks for
Yeah.
taking me into that backstory and and the Rexon effect tie in there. That's super cool. Well, maybe time for one more. I know you were nominated again for Grammys for Ride with Me. That was off of what album was that? The Underground Heat Volume 1. And so now we're in the new, now you're proving that you can, not only could you do it in the 80s and the 90s, and now you're doing it in the new millennium here, because this was out in what, 2003. Gosh, tons of people on that, but Jamie Foxx and Queen Latifah. So many people were on that album. But just take me into Ride with Me and how that was created.
Well, Ride with Me came at a time where, excuse me, we decided, my manager at the time, we decided we were going to put out a record of our own. And we had major distribution with BMG, and we signed with a partnership with a label called iMusic at the time with Mark Geiger, who is actually like the head of performance over at WME now. But for a minute, he had a record label. And we put this record together, and Ride with Me was exciting. We did it with a production company called Mad Funk. We did the entire album with them. And we had quite a few, like you said, guest appearances. But Ride with Me, we did a video for it. A lot of folks showed up to support MC Lyte for the video, which I thought was dope. And then, unfortunately for us, the guy who was in charge of all the promotion, he passed of throat cancer literally 2 days before the record came out.
No, no.
So none of us had any idea that he was actually suffering. But Tower Records was still in effect, and I went. It was like all these records, all these CDs sitting there with MC Lyte's name, but no one to actively move them. It was exciting to release it, but disappointing with the turnout. However, we still prevailed. I think we were nominated for a couple of award shows that year.
Well, very, very cool. Well, it all adds up. You get the BET Hip Hop Lifetime Achievement Award. You get, you're one of the legends of the genre. What advice would you have for, maybe another, up and coming rapper, someone else that grown up, in Brooklyn where you grew up, or anywhere really, to be honest, at this point, or DC if they're coming to the show. What advice would you have for someone else that, today, a kid today, how to make inroads in the genre?
You know what is so interesting, because information was a mystery when I grew up in this business. And now there's information everywhere. It doesn't mean all of the information is correct. So you have to use your better judgment, your gut, and you have to compare information that's given to you and fact check. But there's so much online to give you what it is that you need to be an informed artist and to really have an understanding at it that it's all a business. Yes, we are artists, you're meant to entertain, but there's also a business that has to stand up behind you. If not, it's like you're walking through a set where the fascia of the building is there, but when you walk through the door, it's nothing, it's cardboard. It's like the Truman Show. So you gotta like really study what's happening behind the scenes so that you can really stand tall as an artist and have a structure behind you that can't easily falter. So, and what I mean by that information is you can find out about master sync uses, licensing. You can find out about, royalties, publishing, and how it breaks down, and all the performance companies that you can be involved with. Like it really teaches you the business side of music. And I
Awesome.
think that's what every artist should have in their repertoire or in their toolbox is some information that's going to be useful for them.
Awesome. Well, it's funny. You mentioned the Truman Show. That sparked just a fun question. Do you have a favorite movie over the years? I love to hear when, musicians talk about another medium. So what's MC Lyte's go-to movie?
Mm.
Or several if you can't narrow it down.
Right. I think one of them used to be You Got Mail.
Right.
I love that movie. And When Harry Met Sally.
Nora Ephron, both of them.
I love the music. I love that it was New York City. I love that it touched Christmas. So it had a little bit of a holiday something in there. It spanned over time. So it gave us different looks in fashion and hairstyles and nomenclature. And then a comedy, I love Coming to America. I could watch it anytime. Eddie Murphy did and Arsenio Hall did such a fantastic job with all of the characters that they played. But yeah,
those are three good ones. You can't go wrong with those.
Yeah, and then you could always add The Godfather in there.
Of course, for a drama, that's probably
for a drama, or The Sopranos for a series.
Yeah, you love the New York ones. I'm sensing a theme.
Yeah, you got it.
I love it. Well, you've been more than generous with your time. Again, everyone, it's called MC Lyte, I Am Woman, a celebration of women in hip hop. It's going to be Friday, April 15th, this Friday. So get your tickets now on the Kennedy Center's website. Before we run, in closing, final seconds, when your history is written, when, decades from now, when the obituary is written, hopefully a long time from now, but what do you want your legacy to be? When people look back on MC Lyte's career, compared to all the other hip hop artists, what do you want to be remembered as? A trailblazer? Or what do you want to be remembered as?
Well, definitely a trailblazer that spoke truth to power and gave back.
Awesome. Well, you're giving back at the Kennedy Center at this show. All these artists, lucky to share the stage with you. Now, will you be performing as well, or are you just more of the host?
I will be performing. So exactly what, I'm not going to say because it'll be a little bit of a surprise. But also what I wanted to say when I say give back, we have a foundation. It's called Hip Hop Sisters. We've given away $1 million in scholarships over the last 10 years to young kids looking to further their education. Right now, our partnership is with Dillard University, and we're pushing out some scholars. So giving back is extremely important to me, and also being able to entertain the people, which will happen Friday, April 15th, 8 p.m. And prior to that, though, we do have Beats, Brains, and Business, which is a panel, but I think it's sold out.
And that's going to be at the Kennedy Center as well?
That's going to be at the Kennedy Center in the afternoon. We're talking to young, aspiring artists, managers, producers about what you need to know going into this world of entertainment.
Beats, Brains, and Business panel. And then the show is afterwards at 8:00.
Yes,
All right, cool.
Yes.
Well, it sounds like a fun-filled day on Friday. Are you kidding me? Thank you. You're the legend. You're doing us the favors. Thank you so much for joining us. This is great.
You got it. All right. Take care. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the D.C. area is great, and Podcast D.C. gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast D.C. is the new local app with hundreds of D.C. area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast D.C.